up on Brian Wright's blueprint moving forward, Ethan, just to put a bow on this episode here today. He has been willing, like he's still not a blockbuster guy. That's the point that I'm trying to get at. While he's done more with the Spurs when it comes to these trades that I think was important, and there's been a lot of comments that he's made that have led me to believe that it feels like he kind of had to push the organization to make some of these moves, like to let go of a Derek White or a DeJounte Murray and just go full rebuild after the DeRozan era, as well as the DeRozan trade. Was that his first move, actually?
It would have been his first,
because that was 2019, right?
It was the offseason after we drafted
DeRozan Spurs trade. I'm just going to double check this here.
No, he played one. DeRozan played with Keldon 1 year. So he did not draft Keldon, but he came in the July after we drafted Keldon.
We traded. It was more than I thought. We traded DeRozan in 2021. Yeah, actually,
that's right. He played 2 years.
It just feels so. That time feels so far away. That was such an interesting.
We were in purgatory.
I know. It was just such a. It was like I loved DeMar because it was just like. He was kind of in the same situation as us. Like, he didn't want to be traded. We didn't want to trade Kawhi, but it just was you know what I mean? We were both in San Antonio with the results of the circumstances. And he, he was good to the, the community. He bought a lot of local merch and promoted it and stuff too. So he was good. DeMar was great, but, I know that Brian, I was getting back to something with
you were
Brian
saying
Wright's timeline.
It's not going to be big moves. It's going to be regularly scheduled programming. We're keeping Keldon. We're keeping Devin. We're not making a trade with young guys.
That's essentially what I was getting to. Other than the DeRozan move, which basically think about it: DeMar DeRozan, Derek White, DeJounte Murray. Those are all I was going to say they're all guys who can help playoff teams. That's probably the best way that I could put it. But then I was saying, well, technically, Chicago's not a playoff team and neither is Atlanta. But I think y'all get the point that I'm trying to say here. Those are guys who would be starters, contributors on teams.
They are.
And we decided in that time period to let go of all of them. And it seems like I said, there's been comments that Brian Wright's made. I can't think of every example off the top of my head right now, but one that I can think of is during the, after we got the number 1 pick on ESPN, he's like, they would have probably thrown me in the river if this didn't work out. He said something like that. And it's because I'm pretty sure, all of those moves were made by him, and those type of moves weren't being made before he got here. That's kind of what we talked about in basically a segment a little while ago. And without him, doing that, essentially we wouldn't be in this situation and we wouldn't have all of the guys that we do. And the other thing, like you said, that I wanted to get into as well was the fact that while he did make those moves and he was willing to do those, everything after that, he didn't, there were no blockbuster moves after that. It was it was all calculated. It was all specific. It wasn't just he was like, okay, let's just go trade all of our most players to get the best assets that we can get back. Although that was kind of what he did. It wasn't like he was just like, let's just go do it all right now. Let's just go try to get those assets back as fast as possible. It was like, no, okay, we're going to get rid of DeRozan here. We're going to evaluate DeJounte and Derek more. We're going to let them develop a little bit more, see how they work with the roster. Okay, we can see that Keldon's kind of emerging. He might have a little bit of a higher ceiling than both of these guys. Devin's starting to show a little bit of flashes. And the other thing about Brian Wright is that he's getting all of the intel from practice and training camp, not just from being there, but also the counsel I'm sure that he has with Greg Popovich and the coaching staff as well. So if they're telling him things about the young guys that is exceeding some of the other dudes on the roster, that could kind of push him and give him the confidence to make the decisions that he did. But he had to have the cojones to do that. You see what I'm saying? Because you could have said, hey, we don't know how these other guys are going to turn out. Let's stick with these guys who are sure things and know the Spurs way. But then you're sitting at 45 and 37 in 2023. You see what I'm saying? Like,
Yes.
if he doesn't go out on a limb to make those moves, if he doesn't make the decision, Ethan, I've talked and sat here and said all this stuff. This is really what sums it up in one sentence. If he doesn't make the decision to end the playoff run, the 20-year playoff run with the moves that he makes, we're not sitting here with Victor Wembanyama. And that, regardless of what anyone says, and regardless of who he had around him, that takes a lot of balls, like I said, to like that is a harder thing than probably we realize. Especially when you're having to imagine you're having to tell RC and Pop, like, hey, I know you guys believe in yourselves and believe in the formula and what you can do with this roster, like always, but like we need to cut it off for a couple years if we're going to have a chance. I mean, imagine telling Pop and RC, like, right now, y'all don't have it. We need to get the roster better because even if you think we have the talent to compete here, we don't. Because that's what we were trying to do with those guys. I mean, like, we were trying to play Keldon at the 4. We were trying to make it all fit. And, Pop was his mentality was completely different on the sidelines at that point. And it really took until this season to, or last season, I'm sure, in the middle of it to finally, reap the benefits of that process.
1000%. And my last statement, I agree with everything that you just said. He's done a wonderful job. And it took a lot of guts to make those decisions. But the difference between his past trades with DeJounte, Derek, Jakob, Jay Rich, and trades that he might be making moving forward, he has remained adamant and committed that he is keeping this young core intact for the foreseeable future. I mean, we were the only, fans are the only ones in the past saying, oh, we're not going to trade DJ and Derek. Like, he wasn't saying anything. Like, we were just like, no, there's no way, because we don't do that. We would never do that. And he did it. And he never said otherwise. So far, he's been a man of his word. So I'm willing to buy that he is not wanting to make any blockbuster moves going forward.
Yeah, at least this season. He said it in multiple interviews. He said it verbatim. What will determine our trajectory this season is the guys who are on the court. He said that in an interview after the draft. I mean, and even beforehand, he said in multiple interviews, before people could even finish their questions, go look at Tom Horsborn, go look at Mike Finger, go look at Matthew Tynan, and go look at Jeff McDonald as well. Those are all that's the 3 dudes from the San Antonio News Express, and then also Matthew Tynan, who's been covering for a while and does corporate knowledge on Substack. They all say in all of their interviews before the draft, before they could finish their question about, would you consider trading Devin or Keldon to trade up in the draft? He said no before they could finish the question at all. And it's because, and I'm not saying that's going to be the case, forever, but for this season, we are not moving those guys. We are seeing how they fit around Victor Wembanyama. And considering that both of them are Devin Vassell is a sniper already. I mean, and on top of his ability that's increasing to shoot off the dribble and as a creator, but he fits in perfectly as a 3-and-D guy. If before you even talk about the other emerging skill sets that we're seeing, just placing him around Victor. And I think if Keldon gets more open shots, which he will get next to Victor, that should help his shooting percentage as well, which we saw the potential at the beginning of the year last year of how hot he can get shooting the ball. So it's just to me, it's these dudes fit perfectly around your big. What are you talking about? They're 23 and 22. There's a reason that we gave Keldon an $80 million contract for 4 years. And the other thing is too, and I've said this in the last episode, but just once again, there's also other things that Brian Wright and the team and basketball teams in general evaluate on a team with a player that doesn't necessarily have to do with anything on the court. Example number 1, Draymond Green.
Facts.
Because there's, as much as the court does matter, how your presence, your energy, especially with a guy like Keldon when it's so prevalent, that brings something to the team that even if he's having a bad shooting night, he can positively affect, the mental side, or even he can still positively affect things on the court with just his presence, And I'm not
Agreed.
saying that Keldon's necessarily, there yet where he's affecting the game with just his presence. But on bad shooting nights with Keldon, he's going to be the loudest guy on the bench still. And that's the reason. I mean, that's one of the reasons that the Spurs gave him that contract on top of his ability on the floor. So people can criticize all that type of stuff, but the reason that the Spurs believe in him is because of stuff that is also important to basketball that isn't necessarily basketball, if that makes sense.
1,000%.